listening in today. At this moment, I am now recording the webinar so that if you have to pop out for a minute or you want to kind of come back and learn some more about what we're sharing with you tonight, this will be recorded and will be posted on our website. So thank you for that. And for friends or family who can't make it, we will have this recording out there. We will also be posting the slide deck of tonight to kind of share more information. And that way you can get to Hamilton sing-alongs, newsies, and all the other type of wonderful things that are happening in our district at our elementary schools, such as International Night and the Strings Concert. So I'm Kim Tu. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. And thank you for being here. The purpose of tonight is to talk a little bit about math placement because, believe it or not, once sort of April hits, the end of the school year comes fast, as you can imagine. And so we want to talk about, well, what does that look like next year? And how are we assessing and placing kids in the math placement that meets their needs? So the other thing that we're going to say is that this is truly a webinar. So you can see that there's not a chat feature, but we will be having time for Q&A. So the team here, you can put your questions on the bottom of the screen. There's a little Q&A box. You can type your questions in the box, and then we will go through them at the end and do some Q&A. I also encourage you, there'll be email addresses at the end of this presentation to reach out to the correct people with your questions about anything that you might have about placement, about math programming, etc. So we're here to support you, and we're here to follow up with the questions that you have. We ask that the questions are maybe general questions. I know we all have children. I'm a parent myself. And so we can't answer specific case questions about your child. Well, if they do X, Y, and Z, what does this mean? But general questions that are all good for the good of the order. And then we will happily follow up about your specific questions at a later time via email, phone call, or Zoom. So I'm going to start sharing my screen so that you guys can see the presentation. So I'm just going to go here. So welcome to Math Placement Night. As I said, I am Kim Tu. I'm head of curriculum instruction here at Princeton Public Schools. It's nice to have this many folks on the call today and pleasure of serving you. Jason, you want to go next?
Certainly. Thank you very much for that. My name is Jason Burr. I am principal of Princeton Middle School. It's wonderful to be with all of you tonight, even in webinar fashion, and a very special good evening to all of the rising sixth grade parents who came out last evening for our rising sixth grader conversation. And of course, tonight is about math. So welcome.
Stephanie?
Good evening, Stephanie Tidwell. I'm the supervisor of 6 through 12 mathematics and business education. And I hope that this is a very informative session for you this evening.
Great. Sarah?
Good evening, I'm Sarah Moore. I'm the supervisor of elementary education for Princeton Public Schools. You may hear some really interesting jazz music playing behind me. I'm presenting for the state this evening at a conference at the Crown Plaza in Princeton for decoding dyslexia. So I am hopefully going to be on for the questions portion. If I am not, I'm always available via Zoom or phone call to follow up on anything if you feel that you have a lingering question after this evening. So thank you so much for having me.
Dan?
Hi, I'm Dan Lee. I'm one of the sixth grade math teachers at Princeton Middle School. I've been here for about 9 years now, and I also coach cross country, track and field as well at the middle school.
Thank you. And Latoya?
Good evening, everyone. I am Latoya Waddell. I am the 7th grade math teacher. I don't coach any sports like Dan, but I do run the math club.
Which is great and perfect for tonight. So I just want to take a moment to thank our staff for being here, because we think it's important to, if we're talking about middle school math, to see the people who, are going to be most interacting with your children about middle school math. So we appreciate that. And Mr. Burr, Ms. Moore, and Ms. Tidwell as well for being here so that we can show you as a team how this all works and how this all comes together. So what is our agenda for tonight? The first thing we're going to talk about is what is Linkit. So you might have heard us talking about these online assessments. So we're going to talk about what Linkit is and how they fit into our curriculum and assessment benchmarks. Then we're going to be talking about PMS Math Pathways and on-ramps for students in math placement across middle school. We're also going to talk about special considerations for our students with IEPs, 504, or who are our English language learners. Then we're going to show you rubrics and placement procedures. That will also be available to you on the slide deck. When this is posted, you'll be able to click on the slide deck and on the rubrics themselves so that you can dive into them more deeply. We're going to just do an overview tonight, but that you will have full access to them after this presentation. We're going to talk about timelines and when to expect communication from the school district about placement, what we're doing in our classroom, what instructional resources that we use. And then everyone always asks, well, what comes next? If my child is on this trajectory, what happens in high school? So I know that especially if you're a rising sixth grade parent, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't even think about high school. But other folks who might be those rising in eighth grade parents as well. So what's coming down the road? I think it's important to have that roadmap for you tonight. And then we're also going to talk about collective Q&A and going through the trends that we're seeing in the Q&A feature of the chat tonight.
So to begin,
There you go.
okay, so to begin, before we actually talk about what is Link-It, I want to talk about why Link-It. And I want everyone to recognize that during the course of COVID, we lost a very important, one of our primary sources of data, and that was state assessment data. And with that state assessment data, we were sort of in a conundrum in terms of trying to identify where students were actually performing as it related to state standards without having a district platform in place that actually was a sort of performative benchmarking system of where our students at the beginning, middle, and end of the year. So Link-It actually allows us to have a data source that sort of steps in for us if we ever have a situation again like COVID. We now have a data source that allows us to do benchmarking 3 times during the course of the year to identify where students are actually on grade level standards. So it allows us to actually monitor student performance in the New Jersey Student Learning Standards all across the school year so that we can basically look at student growth. And also it helps teachers to identify how they can support teachers along the course of the school year so that everyone is moving along towards the standards that they need to meet for the end of the year for the next grade level.
So now we're going to talk about PMS Math Pathways.
So if you have a child with an IEP, you'll be discussing placement with your case manager to ensure that their needs are being met, and they'll receive their modifications and accommodations throughout the placement process. Students with a 504 plan will receive their accommodations throughout the placement process, and students in ESL programming will also receive accommodations throughout the placement process.
And what we want to also look at are our actual pathways that we currently have at the middle school right now. So what I'm going to do is walk you through 3 different pathways. For the student who follows the regular trajectory of entering 6th grade in pre-algebra accelerated, and then moving on in 7th grade to algebra 1, for 8th grade, the student will have the opportunity to either take algebra 2 or geometry. For a student who enters 6th grade and is in pre-algebra accelerated, but then ends up in algebra 1 part 1, in 8th grade, that student will move to algebra 1 part 2. And let me just say that these courses, algebra 1 part 1 and algebra 1 part 2, are by the end of 8th grade, a full algebra class. And then for students who enter 6th grade who may have the opportunity because they are advanced to participate in algebra 1 as a 6th grader, for 7th grade, that student will have the opportunity to take either algebra 2 or geometry. And so that would mean in 8th grade, if they took algebra 2 in 7th grade, they would take geometry in 8th grade and vice versa. So for the new school year, we are entering into the program the opportunity for students to take geometry.
And so Stephanie, can you speak to that our 7th grade students, when we get to the timelines, we'll talk about that they will be able to, if they've completed algebra 1, they will be able to take geometry or algebra 2. And we'll get more into detail of that when we do our placement guidelines.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So one of the other things we want to mention tonight is that on the last board agenda, we approved a math program review. So with this upcoming spring and fall, we will be doing a program review to ensure we are providing a course sequence that makes sense for all learners and meet their diverse needs, that we are making sure that we are aligning and embedding our core New Jersey math standards into our courses, and that we are implementing research-based instructional practices. So it really is a way for us to hold up a mirror and talk about how do we do placement? Does our course sequence make sense? Are we preparing our students for success when they get to high school and post-college and career? So more information will be coming out soon, probably I would say late April, early May, because we are going to be part of that process, our focus groups. So we will be talking with students, we will be talking with staff. And when I say we, I mean like the program review team, because it is an external evaluator. And they will also be doing caregiver focus groups as well to talk with families about their experiences with the math program, ways they think that it's working and ways they think it can be improved. So that information will be shared, like I said, probably early May for a later May focus group timeline. They will also be going into our classrooms and working with staff and just doing walkthroughs and looking at our instructional materials. The primary focus is on grades 3 to 8 because we see that upper elementary leading into middle school as like a core foundational level, but they will be popping into some high school classrooms, talking with high school parents, high school kids and staff, etc. But our core focus of that program review are grades 3 to 8. And we've also added computer science because we believe that New Jersey computer science falls under the math umbrella. And so how are we preparing our students for the future? And so we're looking at programming at our middle school level and our high school level. So now we will go into the actual rubric reviews to talk about placement.
So I'll be talking about moving into 6th grade information for our rising 6th grade families. So there are a few indicators that we're going to look at for placement for rising 6th grade students. We're going to look at a math placement rubric, the New Jersey Department of Education's marker for future success, and an Algebra 1 placement rubric. So our math placement rubric for pre-algebra has a few components. The first part is the Link It Form C. So students take the Link It Form C. Link It is really grading end of the year standards for students. We're going to be giving them a pre-algebra readiness assessment. So both of these are scored either not meeting a 0 or exceeding expectation as a 4. And then we're going to use the New Jersey Department of Education markers for future success with that same rating scale from 0 through 4. Does not yet meet expectations versus exceeds expectations. When you tally in these points together, go to the next slide. We're going to do some point placement. So if a student scores 0 through 11 points, those students will be placed into pre-algebra for 6th grade. If a student scores 4s across the board and ends up with a placement of 12, those students will be given an Algebra 1 readiness assessment. Students who score 90% or higher on the algebra readiness assessment will then be placed into Algebra 1. And we really want to emphasize that this is a handful of students that will be ready to take Algebra 1 in 6th grade. The default understanding is that most students will enter into pre-algebra with a handful being ready to place into that Algebra 1 based on these rubrics. So if a student is ready to place in to take our test for Algebra 1, we have another rating scale for them as well.
And I do think it's important to point out that typically Algebra 1 is an 8th grade course. It really is a high school course, but in a district like Princeton, it's an upper middle school course. So this is truly an accelerated placement for students to take at a 6th grade level. Oh, Stephanie, you're muted.
We also want you to understand that we use multiple measures when we're talking about looking at placement. And so one of the measures that we use are the New Jersey Department of Education's marker for future success. This actual rubric allows teachers to look at students from a perspective beyond assessment and classwork. It allows them to look at students based on their performance as relates to their participation in class, their actual independence as a learner and as a student, and also including their class attendance. I want to note, however, though, we do not place a lot of weight on the class attendance. We do take into consideration that there are extenuating circumstances that happen with students. And so therefore, class attendance is not one that we weigh heavily in using this rubric.
So we continue with that math placement rubric for algebra. So again, we're looking at those multiple measurement points. We're looking at that link it form C to see if that student is exceeding. Their pre-algebra readiness assessment, again, we would want to see that 4 for exceeding. And that marker for success that Stephanie just explained, we'd also want to see a 4 in that. In addition to those, we're also adding in one other metric of the algebra readiness assessment. So if a student scores 90% or higher, they will be placed into Algebra 1. 0 to 14 points on this rubric, students will be placed in pre-algebra. We do want to note that students who achieve 12 points on their tasks 1 through 3 and scoring 86%, so they've almost got that 90%, they're almost there, they can be waived into Algebra 1 per family request. So it's not our default recommendation that they attend that Algebra 1. That's really for those students that score 90% or higher, but we do understand there are students on the cusp that, you know, they feel with their families that they're ready for the course. We wanted to provide an option forward for them as well. So what do those timelines look like? I see we're getting a few questions in chat about timelines. So I want to make it very clear that we want to be really transparent with these timelines. May 1st is the end of the year testing window that opens for us and things like Linkit. By May 12th, all Linkit Form C assessments will be given to our 5th grade students. May 15th through 26th, teachers will fill out forms for math placement. So we'll be looking at those markers for future success. We'll be reviewing how they did on those Linkit assessments. May 29th through June 2nd, the algebra readiness assessment will be given to those students who are identified who qualified based on the discussed rubrics we just showed you. And then the week of June 12th, placements will be reviewed and letters will be sent out to families for fall placements. So you'll know where your child is entering for fall before the end of the school year.
And also, we want to look at the rising 7th grade math placement rubric. I'm just going to pull it up on my screen so that I can actually read it. So we are looking at using Linkit benchmarks as one of our multiple measures, and that would be the Linkit Form C. That assessment is actually taking place in May, somewhere around the May area. We also will be having students take an algebra readiness assessment, and they're taking this algebra readiness assessment to identify their performance in their current algebra class. We're using the markers for success. And then we will also be using an open-ended response problems that teachers will be giving through the course of the year. They will be identifying student performance and actually answering open-ended response problems so that we can see how well students are performing in the actual mathematical practices. The performance in the algebra readiness assessment will let us identify whether the rising 7th grade students are ready for the Algebra 1 full year class, that is the accelerated class, or whether they are prepared for the Algebra 1 Part 1 class. We do want to state that the algebra readiness assessment, we do have a particular score that we're looking for students to perform at, and that is an 86%. However, if a student that is a 90%. However, if a student performs at an 86% or higher, the student will be able to waive into the Algebra 1 full year course. Again, we are also developed a rubric for the rising 8th grade students. Here, we're also using the Linkit benchmark, and we are also looking at the student performance in an Algebra 2 readiness assessment, the markers for success, and I'm sorry, I need to put my glasses on because I cannot see that. And the average of their unit assessments for the school year. What we are doing this year is like I said, we are adding geometry to our curriculum. We are offering students the opportunity, if they perform well on the readiness assessment, they can proceed to Algebra 2 accelerated. If they do not perform well on the algebra readiness assessment, you will have the option of waiving into the algebra readiness course if you score at least an 86%, or you can choose to take geometry.
So these are the links to the assessment rubrics. So when we post the slide deck, you'll be able to, I know this is a lot of information all at one time. And if you have more than one child, I can imagine you're like, but what does it mean to go to 8th grade versus going to 6th grade and all of that? So I just want to remind everyone that we will be posting these imminently so that you have access to this information and can review the rubrics. And we are here, obviously, once you have a little bit of a deeper dive into them to answer any questions. And then Stephanie's now going to talk about timelines for rising 7th and 8th graders.
So for our rising 7th and 8th graders, we are opening our actual placement testing window tomorrow for students in grade 7, rising 7th and 8th graders to take the readiness assessments for us to identify their preliminary placement. While we're opening the window tomorrow, I want everyone to be aware that the actual assessments will not start until Monday. So I don't want parents or students to be alarmed to think that you're coming to school tomorrow and all of a sudden you're going to be placed in a position where you have to take an assessment. There will be no assessments tomorrow. The placement timeline for the assessments starts March 24th through April 14th, and the window opens on Monday. This gives the teacher the opportunity to identify when they feel students are ready for the assessments and offer the assessments during that window. Once the assessments are given, teachers will begin reviewing student data and looking at preliminary placement for courses. From that point, May 15th through May 19th, teachers will administer the remaining, like I said, Linkit benchmark assessments so that we have other multiple measures of data to also look at when we are looking at a final placement for students. May 29th through June 20th, we'll begin looking at the actual rubrics to identify student placement and make any adjustments that we feel are necessary. And the week of June 12th, we should be ready to start providing parents and students with their actual fall placements.
Oh, sorry about that, guys. That was my fault. Go ahead.
So we're going to talk now about the instructional materials and resources that we use at the middle school. The instructional materials that we use at the middle school, our textbooks are the Envision textbooks. We use Savvis, because it says Savvis Envision textbook. Savvis is the technology component that's embedded into Canvas that we can deliver the material from the textbook electronically to the students. We use Desmos and we use GeoGebra to deliver interactive slides to the students and interactive activities to the students.
Yeah, in terms of tiered supports, we do a variety of different types of things throughout the different classrooms. However, a big tool that we've been using throughout 6th, 7th, and 8th grade has been Delta Math as an online platform. Besides Delta Math, which we have been using, interchangeably with written work on paper and pencil as well, we also generally provide guided notes. So students who are able to use that, support in terms of using the space a little bit better and keeping organized, and so helping with executive functioning. We also do a lot of different types of small group instruction, whether it is during pause, time in the day where we have some time to kind of meet with students one-on-one and conference with them and give them some more individualized help, as well as just spending some time in small group instructions and stations throughout our classrooms. We can meet with students and give them a little bit more one-on-one instruction as well.
What does a typical PMS math lesson look like? At PMS, we have a 5-day schedule, and it's a 5-day rotating schedule. Days A through D are 50 minutes long. And again, they rotate. So if I have one class the first period, one on A days, then on B days, I'll have them second period, C days, I'll have them third period. And I only have them 3 out of the 4 days from A to D. We'll do a do now at the beginning of class. There will be some type of mini lesson or whole group teacher instruction. Students will then go into their guided practice and or individual practice where they may use the guided note sheets, they may use the technology resources that Jan just spoke about. And then at the end of the class, we'll have an exit ticket to see where the students are and to be better prepared for the next day.
In terms of the A through D schedule, where we have a little bit longer with the students, on E days, we actually see all of our 6 classes in the same day. So the classes are a little bit shorter on those days. But it's a great time where we can kind of get caught up with students, check in with them as well. Specifically, like to my classroom, I use this day to kind of give differentiated instruction. So whether it's giving some extra practice where you can kind of go back and scaffold back to, maybe previous concepts that students may be struggling on. We're also providing more challenging work that lets students kind of dive a little bit deeper into some concepts that they're interested in. So providing some different tiered type of work is something that we try to do and kind of meet kids where they are and give them a little bit of chance to work and become confident at a level that they're currently at. And so one-on-one conferences are good just to kind of check in with students and build a relationship with them as well. Checking in with students and helping them make sure, like if we have ELL students or students with IEPs or 504s, just trying to spend a little bit more time to making sure that they're feeling comfortable. We also kind of use some E-days as well to just help with executive functioning, organizing their binders, just making sure students are kind of, having all the right tools to be successful on the other days. In terms of activities and investigations, we try to mix in some projects as well. Some of us will use different platforms for that, some hands-on activities where, maybe they would just be doing a project where they could be looking at parabolas and things of that type of nature, where they're looking at the path of a ball. I know that some of the 8th grade or 7th grade teachers have done stuff with quadratics like that in the past. In 6th grade, we've done ratios and rates projects where the students investigate things like that. And, in my class, we bake chocolate chip cookies, and like we also just kind of like all the students have to figure out the ratios of the ingredients. And it kind of is like different types of things. So menu activities where students can kind of, have some chance to kind of collaborate with their classmates and meet each other and also build a little bit better of a classroom climate as well.
Yes, and then I didn't answer about the technology, but the technology that we use in the math classrooms, we use Canvas. I know for me, I post all of my assignments on Canvas, whether they're digital or on paper. We use Delta Math. We use Delta Math for daily instruction. And also, I know Stephanie was talking about the Linkit assessment, but if students are struggling on a topic and on the Linkit, we attach it to Delta Math to kind of help them improve as well. Decimals and GeoGebra, again, interactive slides, and Google Sheets and slides too, just to help the students investigate and to do more interactive math work with each other.
Thank you.
Should I talk about this one? Sure. So I think we just think it's also important to kind of convey to families out there as well that, a lot of the fundamental skills that they're learning throughout pre-algebra, algebra 1, and algebra 2 are, very big concepts when it comes to college readiness and some of those college entrance exams that kind of are assessing, where they're at. So, when a bulk of it is being covered in middle school, keep in mind that when they take those SAT, ACT exams, that's typically going to be, more closer to sophomore, junior year, if not in the fall of senior year. So building a strong foundation is really important, and making sure that students have a very strong foundation and a deeper understanding of concepts is just important. And so throughout middle school, we do offer these 3 courses, but keep in mind that, these are the bulk concepts that are on those exams. And, a lot of times the students need to also spend some time reviewing, or if they're, pushing through a little bit quicker at a pace in middle school, they may not have a full understanding of it, but, obviously some students will. But I think it's just good to kind of keep in mind that, a lot of these are concepts that are big for that later on part of high school.
Thank you, Dan.
And because we know that you will also have students who will end up going to the high school, we wanted to talk about the process of students actually rising to 9th grade or 8th graders who will be going to Princeton High School for their freshman year. We also have a placement process for the high school where we identify whether students will either be in geometry or geometry accelerated. However, based upon the fact that students, if they are in a accelerated program where 6th grade, they actually were in Algebra 1, and they have the opportunity to take either Algebra 2 or geometry in 7th grade, they will take one or the other course in 8th grade. And so by the time they're actually entering the high school, they will actually be entering the high school in pre-calculus if they are in that particular advanced track. But for students who are coming out of 8th grade and actually going into, for this school year, going into 9th grade, we will be looking at using the placement rubric to identify whether they will be placed in either geometry or geometry accelerated. And this is just a chart to show you the pathways. And once again, each student is different. So as I said, if you attended the program of studies night, each student is different. So this is an example of typical pathways that can exist for students. This does not mean that a student is married to this particular pathway. So we have the opportunity for students who are in 8th grade, who are either in Algebra 1 Part 2 or in Algebra 1, because that's what the course actually is. As a 9th grader, they could end up in geometry, then proceed to Algebra 2 in 10th grade, pre-calculus, and by 12th grade, take AP Stats and AP Calculus AB. Another student who is either in Algebra 2 or Geometry Accelerated for 9th grade would take either one of those courses based upon their previous year course, take Pre-Calculus Accelerated as a 10th grader, and then take AP Stats and AP Calc AB or BC, and then be also able to take multivariable calculus in 12th grade. And next to that, you see the actual computer science courses that students are able to take at the high school based upon their grade level, as long as they have completed Algebra 1.
Okay, so we have time now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I know the panel was answering some of the questions in the chat. Stephanie, can you speak to, someone asked about the math curriculum online. Is that the most up-to-date math curriculum that can be found on our district website?
The curriculum or the actual pathways?
Curriculum, the actual.
Yes, so the curriculum is up to date. I was answering a question in the chat. Someone was asking about the fact that Dr. Mailu's report showed that our Algebra 1 curriculum was actually 8 weeks of review of 8th grade math. The curriculum was rewritten this past summer to correct that finding. So we have been working on the curriculum. So there have been changes in the curriculum, and what you see online is what is up to date.
Great, thank you. There is not an opportunity. So if someone is asking, can they take Algebra 2 and geometry in 8th grade together? There would not be room in the child's schedule to do that, because we offer a full middle school schedule with ELA, social studies, science, our exploratory program, etc. So that would be the pathway in their math course for the grade level. What happens if your child in 6th grade is taking Algebra 2? I think that would be a very unique situation, and I don't know where they'd be taking it, because we don't, Algebra 1 is the course that is the accelerated pathway for 6th grade. So I would encourage you to reach out to Stephanie Tidwell here on the call, and we can learn more about the situation. And we do work with the high school. A lot of parents ask, can we send students to the high school for math class? What complicates things, and Mr. Burr maybe can speak more to this, is that both the high school and the middle school have rotating schedules. And so if a child, has math, let's just say first period every day, as Ms. Waddell was sort of explaining, one day it's first period, the next day it's second period, the next day it's third period. Well, the high school has a very similar drop and rotating schedule as well. So they would always be missing other classes. So that is a consideration that we have talked about, but unfortunately, because of the capacity of our buildings and the number of students that we have, our schedules have to function that way, and they are not aligned together, the middle school and the high school schedule. Did I leave anything out, Mr. Burr?
No, you just gave a very good description that our drop rotation schedule, in addition to the high school 6-day schedule, which features a couple of very interesting attributes to meet the needs of high school learners, it's very difficult for our two schedules to mesh up. So that was very well explained.
Yeah. Great question. So if your child is out of the district right now, how would they schedule the assessment? So it's a rising fifth grader. So Sarah Moore is on this call. I will share our email addresses at the end for Sarah and Stephanie. She would be your point person as a rising sixth grade parent to schedule a time for you to do that. So that's a great question.
Can I clarify that?
Yeah.
I just want clarification. Is the student out of the district, but will be attending the district next year? Because what will happen is at least for the middle school, the guidance counselors will notify me of all incoming new students, and we will send out correspondence for testing dates based upon the fact of me getting the list of all incoming new students. So if you have not spoken to a guidance counselor, please speak to a guidance counselor to make sure that your child ends up on the new incoming student list. And that way I can make sure that an assessment is scheduled for your child.
Actually, you're absolutely correct, Ms. Stilwell. Thank you for interjecting there. And because we have also move-ins coming from 7th and 8th grade as well. So yes, so please reach out to be on that list, and then you'd be given a placement date, because we also have to have you in our system. Because Linkit speaks to our Power School, which is our student information system, to be able to assign the assessments, etc. Just trying to go through to see some of the common. So Stephanie, we get this question: is there any content on the algebra readiness test that is not covered in the pre-algebra 6th grade class?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. Is there any content on the algebra readiness test that isn't covered in the pre-algebra 6th grade course?
So the algebra readiness assessment is basically assessing standards that are 6th, 7th, 8th grade standards. In other words, the standards that students should know to be ready for Algebra 1. Our curriculum for 6th grade covers 6th and 7th grade standards. And so even though there may not be 8th grade standards covered, understand that all of the math standards are foundational and build on each other. So they should still be able to respond and answer the questions, because of the fact that the 6th grade standards the 7th grade standards are built off of the 6th grade standards. So they should still be able to do well on the assessment.
Are the readiness assessment scores told to parents? Yes. So you will be notified, and then there's a rubric completed for each child. So we will happily be transparent about how your child scored on each layer of that rubric. And then you can see, if they didn't get the placement that you wanted, are they close enough to be waived into, the class, et cetera. We really want to build in those release valves, as we said, because we care about the kids on the cusp who are highly motivated, who might have just missed the cutoff.
Can I just say something else? The other thing is, I really do not want parents to stress your child about trying to study for this placement assessment. There are approximately about 30 some odd questions on the assessment. And like I said, the questions build off of what students have been taught. So there really is no need for you to try to do a study session with the child. Please just let the child go into the assessment and respond as best they can based on their knowledge of the math to do the assessment.
Okay. What fractions of the 8th grade students are in the various math classes? I don't have that off the top of my head. Mr. Burr or Ms. Tidwell, do you?
8th grade students, or?
Yes, so in our 8th grade programming currently.
So
How many
current,
are in algebra 1, part 2, how many are, you know,
okay, so currently we have 4 sections of Algebra 2, and we have, is it 6 sections of 8 sections, excuse me, 8 sections of Algebra 1, Part 2, correct, Jason? Thank you. So 4 sections of Algebra 2, accelerated, and 8 sections of Algebra 1, Part 2.
thank you. And then note next year that we will be adding in that geometry layer so that some of our rising 7th graders will be able to take geometry instead of algebra 2. I just want to make sure that that's clear. That is it's something that the middle school had a handful of years ago. So it has been done in the past, but it has not been done recently. We had another question about an 8th grader coming from another school. So yes, please reach out to do that. So that we can get you on our list. You know, I realize algebra is very important. Is there a reason or purpose for accelerating the learning of algebra? When I was in school, algebra was given in 9th grade. Yes, and typically New Jersey still notes that it is a 9th grade course. Believe it or not, if you have a middle school math certificate and not a 6 to 12 math teaching certificate, you are not allowed to teach algebra 1 because it's not considered a middle school course. And Mr. Burr is nodding because it's hard to find math teachers now. And so that just makes it even harder. Yes, it is considered an advanced level course. And so we really want to make sure that our students have mastered the content and are ready for it. And several of our students have mastered the content and are ready for it. But it is a unique thing that to offer algebra 1 in 6th grade. Our local neighbors, Montgomery, Hopewell, West Windsor, do not offer algebra 1 in 6th grade. We have done in the past 2 years, have opened up opportunities for students to take it. About 10 students are in their current 6th grade class, and they're doing really well, and it's meeting their needs. So we want to meet students' needs across our continuum and support them where we can. But note that they will be, if they're in a 6th grader, they will be taking math with 7th grade students because of the schedule that we have.
Can I just add some additional information? So what I want parents to understand is that we are trying to meet every student where they are. We are not trying to rush students to algebra. We recognize that we have students who come to us who are ready for algebra. And so we don't want any parent or any student to feel that they are subpar because they are not in 6th grade and in an algebra 1 class. Students still have the opportunity to progress and advance to algebra as well as the accelerated classes as they continue to move across the pathways of our math program. So please don't feel as if your child, because they are not in algebra 1 in 6th grade, they don't have the opportunity to enter algebra 1 accelerated or any of our advanced or accelerated classes, because that is not true. They still have the continuum of their career at the middle school and at the high school to once again every year place into a higher level course.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good point. And I just want to clarify, Mr. Burr had just looked everything up. We have 7 sections of Algebra 2 Accelerated and 5 sections of Part 2. Okay, so we have 7 of Algebra 2 and 5 sections of Part 2 in our current 8th grade course. And please note that Pre-Algebra Accelerated in 6th grade is still a wonderful course taught by one of these teachers right here on the call, and and as Ms. Tidwell said, it is a really great foundational piece as we talk about all the assessments that come in high school, you know, PSAT, SAT, ACT, they do really go back to those foundational math skills that are taught in pre-algebra, algebra 1, and algebra 2. Will the placement test for rising 6th graders be administered in school? Yes, yes. They will be administered in school throughout the month of May. You will see when we post the slide deck, the timelines again. So that will be communicated out. Will be during a math block in school, so it will not be disruptive, and that way you don't have to worry about vacations or things happening in the summer like camps where students can't come and take a placement test and feel stressed. It will just be a part of the normal school day.
There are a few questions about the difference if a student in 7th grade is tracked to accelerated algebra 2 or geometry in 8th grade. I see a few asking what does the kid take in 9th grade, depending on which class they take? Do they have to take both courses and what have you?
So what would happen? Okay, so let me give this scenario. If I'm a rising 8th grader and in 8th grade, I take Algebra 2, that would mean in 9th grade, I would be taking geometry. If I'm a rising 8th grader and I take geometry, that would mean as a rising 9th grader, I would take Algebra 2.
Yeah. And then from there, they can move on to the next level. So after Algebra 2, pre-calculus, etc. For the rising 8th graders, can you please explain the options for the placement assessment? So that would be the Linkit Form C, that sort of standards align. And what Linkit does is it aligns to our NJSLA. And so it really is connected to our New Jersey math standards. That's the first part. We also look at those indicators for success that we mentioned earlier about, participation, problem solving, attendance, but as Stephanie said, we don't put as much emphasis on attendance. And we look at an assessment average, I believe, for our rising 8th graders from across the school year. So once again, you will be able to see the rubrics in depth once we post them on our website. This is a good question. Are there sample assessments that we parents can check out to get some general ideas of what the assessments look like?
So because of the fact that we do not own the assessments for the readiness assessments and the Linkit benchmark assessments belong to the Linkit company, we do not have access or the ability to provide public knowledge of the questions because we do not own them. What I can say is that if you look at any assessments that align to the New Jersey student learning standards, those are the types of questions that you can expect to see on the Linkit benchmark. You can also look at does the state allow parent access to the sample NJSLA questions?
I was going to say that.
Yeah. So if you look at the NJDOE, New Jersey Student Learning Assessment questions for the different grade levels and contents, there are also similar questions that you would see on the assessment because Linkit aligns their questions and develops their questions to align to our state assessments. Yeah.
So those Pearson practice tests, they look very similar to what Linkit has because they're aligned. Can the school post the ISBM school books of the textbooks? On the curriculum, it has the textbook name and the edition. So that should be able to find it there. It is posted in the curriculum. Okay.
Kim, they can also find the ISBN number if their child brings their textbook or workbook home. If you open up the front cover of your child's textbook and look right under the copyright, usually you will see a letter that says ISBN with the number sign, and that is the numbers following that are the actual textbook number. If you use that, you should be able to find the book online if that's what you're looking for.
Great point. Thank you. Someone asked how many people are on the call? 205 folks are on the call. So you could be in a lot of other places tonight. So thank you for being here. What tools or aids do you have to help us to decide between geometry and algebra 2? So you would follow that rubric. So based on that placement. So Stephanie, could you go into a little bit more depth about that?
Sure. So our current trajectory are that students at the middle school would take pre-algebra, algebra 1, and algebra 2. So what we're first doing is we're using the rubric to identify students who would actually place our normal trajectory, which would be moving from algebra 1 into algebra 2. For students who are on the cusp, who may not make the algebra 2 placement, we're saying we can offer them geometry. However, if your child places on the readiness assessment, has a score of at least 86%, you can choose to waive your child into the algebra 2 accelerated course. So we're looking to follow our normal placement procedure and offer geometry accelerated for students who are just below the cusp of meeting the guidelines for Algebra 2.
Someone asked, how many students will we place in accelerated algebra 1? There is no cap. That we don't have like a cap on that. It's if they place on the rubric. I believe we had maybe 7 or 8 2 years ago, and we have maybe 7 or 8, less than 10 this year. That tends to be the typical, but every group is different. This is a larger 5th grade class, so I can't say how many it is, but we do not say, oh, we've hit our limit and we're not going to offer it anymore. It's about placement and making sure that they're able to be successful, because they are skipping a course by starting Algebra 1 in 6th grade. If the assessment is to decide whether 6th grader can skip pre-algebra, why not focus the test on pre-algebra only? Why test them on 7th grade content? Stephanie, can you talk about the building of the standards and how it leads to like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math standards and pre-algebra?
So what I've tried to help parents and students understand is that when we're talking about Algebra 1, we are not actually talking about 7th or 8th grade content. We're talking about students being in 6th grade and actually skipping 3 years worth of math, because there are 3 years worth of math standards that are the foundation for Algebra 1, because the state of New Jersey still looks at Algebra 1 as being a high school class. So when we are assessing students for their entrance into Algebra 1, we're trying to make sure that students have familiarity with grade level standards, because we're coming from 5th grade, going into 6th grade, and we're saying that you are going to have a student who has knowledge of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade standards, because those are the foundational standards required for Algebra 1. So that's why we're focusing on making sure that we can identify that students have a solid foundation in those standards, because we do not want to put students in jeopardy of being in a course that they cannot be successful in.
Thank you. Someone asked about, is this test given like a standardized assessment with accommodations for placement?
If the student is required to receive accommodations, we will have to administer all assessments based upon the accommodations that they would receive as if they were taking a state assessment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The next question, this isn't the topic for tonight, but I think it all connects. Is there any information about summer math classes? Stephanie, can you briefly speak on that?
Sure. The actual packets for summer math placement are on the math website. The application is open and students can sign up for summer math advancement. It is for rising 8th graders. Rising 9th graders through rising 12th graders. So anyone that is going to be a freshman next year can take our summer math advancement courses. We are offering Algebra 2, geometry for rising 9th graders, and we have a different program for students who are at the high school.
Thank you. I think we answered this, but I just want to make sure we're hitting it. What is the assessment scope of the readiness placement test? Is the scope the same for rising 6th grade students as it is for rising 7th grade students?
So when we say the scope, I just need to be clear, because we're talking about assessing for 2 different math classes here. So rising 6th grade students are being assessed for algebra. Rising 7th grade students are also being assessed for it because they're in 6th grade now. If they weren't already in algebra, they're being assessed for Algebra 1 or being in the Algebra 1 Part 1 class.
Mm-hmm. This is a good question that we get a lot. Is the correct understanding that a student in Algebra 1 Part 1 will not have a chance to move over to the accelerated pathway, no matter how well the student is doing? And I know LaToya and I have had conversations about this, and Stephanie, can you guys weigh in on that question?
Yes, so currently the way the program is set up at the middle school, the Algebra 1 Part 1 class is split between 2 years. And so therefore the difficulty in transitioning, let's say from 7th grade to 8th grade to another math class is that we are saying, based upon the way our curriculum is currently written, that the student has not actually completed a full year of algebra. And that is something that we recognize that is a problem. And we are looking at that as one of the things that we take into consideration as we continue to review not only the curriculum, but as we also look at our program review.
Thank you. And I also think that, if a student is doing really well, a teacher will advocate for them and say that maybe this is not the correct placement and really start challenging them in that class and shifting them to where they need to be, for sure. Can a student from non-accelerated pre-algebra in 6 have the opportunity to move up to algebra 1 accelerated in 7th grade? So let me clarify. The vast majority of 6th graders are taking pre-algebra accelerated. That is the 6th grade default course. So what also is being offered is algebra 1 accelerated for our students who are ready to skip over pre-algebra because they have the skills and the content already mastered and they're ready for algebra 1. But if they're not ready, every other 6th grade student takes pre-algebra accelerated. And then at the end of 6th grade, at our current placement process is they either go to algebra 1 accelerated in 7th grade, or they will go to algebra 1 part 1. Okay, so most 6th graders are in that pre-algebra accelerated camp unless they've already mastered that pre-algebra content. Do you have an estimate of what will happen with the new system in terms of ratio for accelerated to non-accelerated? Is the goal to have fewer accelerated classes? No, actually, we've added accelerated pathways. There is no goal to limit accelerated courses. What we're doing by adding geometry is that if students are taking algebra 1 in 6th grade now, and then they're taking algebra 2 in 7th grade, we need to give them a course in 8th grade because, as we talked about earlier, it's really hard with the high school schedule. So we're bringing geometry back in. So then now our 7th graders can either, whether they're in the accelerated track or not, decide in 8th grade, do I want to take algebra 2 or do I want to take geometry? So taking geometry in middle school is accelerated. Taking algebra 2 in middle school is accelerated. So all of those courses are important. Good question. Is it better to take geometry first or algebra first? Stephanie, you want to weigh in on that?
So we had an extensive discussion. I don't know if anyone on the call participated in the conversation with Dr. Eric Mailu when he actually presented his review of our curriculum. And he identified that taking algebra 2 or geometry, one or the other, there was no necessarily a right or wrong whether you take algebra 2 or geometry first. The most important thing is that we know that both of those courses are needed if the child is going to take pre-calculus because of the type of work you will be doing in pre-calculus in terms of spatial reasoning as well as algebraic reasoning.
Good, thank you. Will there be an additional placement test in the fall? No, unless a child is new, and then they would be in our summer scoop up for the determined placement in the fall. So it would only be a part of it. Are NJSLA scores used for math placement? So that is on the table for the future, but not currently, because by the time the district receives NJSLA scores, it is too late. Linkit is aligned to NJSLA. So if they are meeting or exceeding at Linkit, it is correlated to the NJSLA score that they receive. And you actually it is a predictor of the score that they will receive on the NJSLA. So the Linkit allows us to have a more timely data scoop of students so that we can schedule accordingly, because as you can imagine, our middle school schedule has a lot of moving pieces, and we want to make sure that we have balanced classes, that we're not overloading certain teachers, etc. You know, someone put out a point, essentially your placement after 6th grade dictates your math path moving forward. Yes and no. We do offer opportunities in the summer to accelerate. So someone asked, well, can rising 9th graders take pre-calculus? If they want to take geometry over the summer here, yes, they can take pre-calculus in 9th grade, if that's the path that you want to be on. At the high school level, I think it's really important when you look at that pathways chart, Even if I was in Algebra 1, Part 1 in 7th grade and Algebra 1, Part 2 in 8th grade, I can still get to AP Stat. I can still get to AP Calc. And the College Board has also, and this is something our district will be talking about for down the road because it's not online yet, AP Pre-Calc will also be an option for them. So there are plenty of high level math opportunities in high school. So I don't want to say that, oh my gosh, everything depends on where they place in 7th grade. There's always a pathway. There's always an opportunity for students who want more challenge in math to receive it, especially at the high school level, because there are so many more courses at the high school. So I just, want to make that clear. Can you share the link where topics are taught in different middle school math levels that are listed on the district website? So I can't do that here because of the way the webinar is formatted. But if you reach out to Stephanie, or if you're a rising 6th grade parent, Sarah, they can send you that link and get that to you. What are the options if a student wants to take math course in the summer? So it is on our website. So that's technically considered option 2. We do not, it's for rising 9th graders and up. We do not offer summer math courses in middle school programming. I've heard that it's hard to get into summer advancement classes, such as geometry for a rising 9th grader. Is this true? Are there enough spots in these classes for everyone who wants to take them? Stephanie, can you answer that?
Every student who has ever applied to our summer program has been admitted to our summer program. We don't have a set number of seats. We hire teachers to make sure that we can accommodate the students who apply. Previous years, we had 2 sections of Algebra 2. We've had 3 sections of geometry. The least that we've needed is a 1 teacher for pre-calculus, because we have a small number of students who try to take pre-calculus, but we've always had enough seats for students who want to take the summer math classes.
Okay, great. Are all these pathways only for math, or will we be meeting like this for other core classes? So one of our goals, that's a great question. So I think we wanted to talk about math because you see it's complicated. There are a lot of pathways in math and a lot of moving pieces. So that's why we want to be transparent. We want to talk to you about the process. And that way, when your child comes home and says, oh, I took this Linkit assessment today and Mr. Lee said, or Ms. Waddell said, that you know what's going on, right? That's really important to us, and that you're getting letters by the end of the school year about what's next. In ELA, English language arts, in social studies, in science, there are not these moving pieces. But that does, as head of curriculum, that is something we want to do more of. We want to spotlight the work that your students are doing. So often, we talk about the high school, we talk about elementary school. I'm a middle school teacher. There's a lot of fantastic things that are happening in our middle school. And so that's really good feedback. And I think we can partner with Mr. Burr and possibly the PMS PTO about doing some of this work and talking more about our other fantastic programming that we offer. And I love when we can put staff in front of you so that you can see their faces. They know your kids, they know the curriculum, they know the content, and really can, we can build a team around that. Do you offer summer math classes for need and reinforcement of concepts, not accelerated summer programming? So we do offer the bridge program, but that's more at the high school level. We offer Jumpstart at the elementary level, but that does include rising 6th graders. And then next year, we're still fleshing this out, offering before school support. So that staff can support your children. I know that Mr. Lee does a lot of morning work now, working with our students to just give them that extra boost or extra attention. And we just feel that if kids are wanting more time to talk about school, we want them to be doing this work and getting the support that they need. So yes. What is the teacher to student ratio for the summer program? I don't know if Stephanie, if you mentioned that, I might have missed that.
We keep the class sizes small. We try to keep the class sizes to 15 students to 1 teacher.
Okay. Let's see. Sorry, the questions keep coming in. Let's see.
Can I answer the question about NJSLO scores used for math placement? I just need everyone to understand that we do not have the NJSLA scores back in time for placement. We will use them on the back side of placement. So for example, after we have done placements, And we've looked at all of our multiple measures of data. If we have a math score that comes in and we realize that the student has performed very well on a particular NJ-SLA test, we will also take that into consideration for placement. But the scores are not back in time for us to actually use the score as a criteria for placement.
What percentage of students pass the summer school classes?
I would have to actually go pull up data from previous years. I don't have that information readily available.
But it's a nice percentage. I know that most
The
students
majority of the students end up advancing over a course, but I also need parents to understand that there have been students who've taken the class and have been in the class and have not wanted to advance. So they've taken the course just to take the course, but not tried to advance over the course.
Yeah.
So they've taken it more or less as preparation for high school or for the next level course.
Yeah. Another question was, what math course is prerequisite for other AP subjects in high school? There really isn't, it's hard to explain, like there's not a certain course that is the course of prerequisite for everything. Stephanie, can you just briefly describe that? I know we're talking about middle school, but you know.
So the best thing to do, because we're talking about high school courses, would be to look on the Princeton High School website and pull down the program of studies. And as you look at the program of studies in the math department, you will see all of the math courses that we offer and our prerequisite math courses for any of the courses that a student is interested in taking.
It sounds like you need to get a certain grade during the academic year in order to take the summer course. Can you elaborate on that, Stephanie?
Can you repeat that question again?
They're saying it sounds like you need a certain grade during the academic year in order to take a course in the summer. Is this correct?
The grade that is required in the course is listed in our application. I don't know the grades off the top of my head, but I do know that I believe a B- is the lowest grade that we're looking at. So, but if you actually go online and click on the Rising Ninth Grade application packet, it lists the grade requirement if you're in Algebra 1, Algebra 1 Part 1, Part 2, or geometry, and the same thing for our high school courses.
Just typing an answer 1 second. Is there only a small number of students will be placed in accelerated algebra and all will be accelerated pre-algebra? Did we eliminate non-accelerated pre-algebra and combine the two groups together? So I believe now, it was before my time, it was before Ms. Tidwell's time. I believe that it was 2019 that everyone went to accelerated pre-algebra, Mr. Burr and Mr. Lee, is that correct? Yes, okay. Yes, so thank you for that question. I'm just gonna send this answer here. So we currently do not allow skipping over geometry. There's a whole other piece here that is like state assessment requirements, etc., graduation requirements. It gets pretty complicated, especially with math. So what we do though is if you would say that you're doing Algebra 2 in 8th grade and you want to start pre-calc in 9th grade, you can take that geometry course over the summer. And I also want to make note, every child is different, every need is different, but pre-calculus is a junior level class. So I just want to make that known. So I don't want anyone to feel that they have to take geometry over the summer to kind of catch up or keep up. When you see the PowerPoint again and you see the pathways in high school, every child, no matter what pathway they're on from 6th grade to 7th grade and on, will be able to take an AP math class if they want to. And we want to encourage that. And if that's not for them, then that's not for them, but they will be able to take an AP course in their high school career, no matter what pathway or trajectory that they're on. Okay. What help is offered for students who have a low score in math? Mr. Burr and Ms. Waddell and Mr. Lee, could you help answer that?
Yeah, so currently Mr. Lee is one of the handful of math teachers who are offering assistance in the mornings. Students can come in, get extra help in math. It's been very successful, especially this quarter. Our numbers are rising. I would also mention that as we think about taking a whole child approach in the middle school, every day there is a focus period that we call PAWS, PAWS, and that's a 30-minute period in the day for students to get assistance if they need it or to work on some extra homework. So that's another way that we build some support into the school day.
Is there co-teaching available for all the middle school math courses? So there's co-teaching available that follows the students. Programming follows the students' needs in the IEP. So that's a great question to ask your case manager, because we know that there are, different supports that are warranted with an IEP, including co-teachers. I think we have a couple more questions. So thank you guys for hanging in there. We appreciate your questions. Are the students taking 6th grade math at this point covering the standards that are tested via Linkit?
Yes, they are. That's the Linkit Form C at all grade levels are students being assessed on the standards that they are being taught this school year at the grade level. So the Linkit Form C is assessing the actual teaching and learning that that's actually happening during the course of this school year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you elaborate on the Jumpstart program for rising 6th graders? So the Jumpstart program is specifically targeted to help students who need a little bit of a boost in math and ELA. So it is an entrance criteria of certain different test scores, how students are doing on the standardized, not just standardized testing, but writing assessments, reading assessments, math assessments throughout the school year. The teachers, if they had during conferences, we're supposed to start talking with parents whose children were eligible based on those cut scores for that extra boost. I would encourage you reaching out to Sarah Moore if you have questions about your specific child and if they qualify for the Jumpstart program for that rising 6th grader. Another question, I think we have about 2 more. What if a 6th grader is doing well in pre-algebra and then doesn't do well on the algebra assessment? Can they do algebra if the teacher advocates for them? Well, I think there's multiple prongs on the rubric, right? Like the markers for success and the waiver piece at the end. So we would look at it and the teacher would obviously be an advocate if they feel that, a child is on that cusp that we talked about and where there are, but it's not just, that one, piece of assessment. And someone asked, what about grades? We're trying to, I'm a teacher. There's a lot of teachers probably on this phone call, besides the panelists here in front of me. Every teacher grades a little bit differently. And so we want to try to have an equitable experience because, maybe I give a lot of extra credit, but Ms. Tidwell doesn't, right? And so how does that look? So we really try to look at assessments from the school year and the assessments like Linkit, the markers for success, to provide an even playing field for students for placement. Because if it's just like, oh, they have an A, well, an A might look differently across different things. And I might have a 90 in one class. And because some things are graded a little bit differently, someone else has a 95. So we just want to make sure that we have that even playing field. Okay, so I'm going to put up my screen one more time. Because we've sort of hit the end of tonight. So next steps for all of you still on the call. So thank you so much for still being here. We have a frequently asked question document we're going to probably put together of some of the things that we're hearing, from tonight. A recording of this webinar will also be available. Remember, rising 6th grade, that would be Sarah Moore. And then rising 7th and 8th grade would be Stephanie Tidwell. I felt like there were a lot of folks on the call tonight who were new to the middle school. So please, if you haven't reached out, Mr. Burr, what would be if they're a new parent coming in, who would be the best point person at the middle school to reach out to about getting on that placement list?
I think you can send an email directly to me. That's Jason Burr at PrincetonK12.org. We'll make sure that we get you set. Of course, last night we introduced that, we had a rising 6th grade parent meeting Jessica Kilgore will be the sixth grade principal next year. So you can always email Jessica Kilgore, and of course, first name, last name at PrincetonK12.org. Sharon D. Sebastian is currently scheduled to be your child's sixth grade counselor. And therefore, any of those people can help get you situated if you are a rising sixth grade parent. And of course, if you're just new to the district, you can just go ahead and email me.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen again, and I'm going to stop recording.